We're talking about Top Chef Season 14, Episode 2. This is Deconstructed, the Top Chef podcast. Welcome to the only podcast that breaks down the food of Top Chef. I'm Sam Chen, and with me is my co-host, Peter Letterman. How's Hungry Peter doing today?
Hungry as always.
What's for lunch?
I haven't decided yet. I think Korean fried chicken eventually.
Yes.
They open a banchan out here. I'm very excited.
Oh, yes.
If you haven't been to banchan yet and you have one in your city, do so immediately.
It's sad because I hadn't experienced it until I went to like SF and actually had real fried chicken.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh,
It's amazing.
so
they
good.
fry it twice. What do? They fry it, then they dunk it in the delicious sauce, and then
Yeah.
they fry it again, and they dunk it back in sauce or something. It's really
something
good.
ridiculous.
It's super
my
crunchy and
goodness.
amazing and salty and all the good things.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. It actually kind of leads into what I'm affectionately calling this episode, which is a line from the show, which was, the secret ingredient is twice the fat.
Yes, especially with Southern cooking.
Yeah, exactly. So this episode was basically a continuation of episode 1, which was a big quickfire. This was a big elimination challenge. So we unpredictably saw them split up into the rookies and the veterans. Both had to cook kind of individual dishes, but for a Southern-like meal, right?
Yeah.
And so, just like we predicted, Emily was the instigator once again with this, like, I'm not a rookie, I'm a veteran, I just haven't been on this show long enough.
I don't know if they're editing it that way or that's just Emily's personality. I'm sort of hitting on the latter one.
100% sure it's her personality.
Yeah, and she also got into that whole biscuit debate also.
Oh my, yeah, exactly.
Yelling at everyone to make biscuits. Why didn't she just make biscuits?
Yeah.
She made shrimp and dressed cucumbers. You could make biscuits also.
Exactly.
Or don't demand other people make it. If you're so adamant about it being on the menu, then make it yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with the season is until someone from the rookie team starts to actually hit it out of the park and get comfortable, we're going to see more and more of this. I mean, I think, not to get too far ahead, but next episode looks like they are mixing up team-wise,
Right.
veterans and rookies. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but it's still one of those things. And I think Tom put it really well this episode where he said, it's not like you cooked bad food, you just went up against a team batting 1,000.
And they really did.
Yeah.
I mean, the team of veterans put up one of the best meals I've ever seen on Top Chef.
Yeah.
I'm not saying one of the meals I'd like to eat the most, just one of the most cohesive meals.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start with the top team, with the veteran team. So we had the three top dishes were Casey's collard greens, John, who did a Carolina rice and okra, and then Sheldon, who did a eggplant something dish that I don't really understand, but they really like the eggplant in it.
It
apparently.
looked really good.
Yeah.
There was fish sauce in it. If there's fish sauce in
Of
it,
course.
it's going to be good.
Of course.
Hopefully.
What stuck out to you about the veteran team other than the fact that they had their shit together?
Well, I liked watching Sheldon this week because Sheldon made something that sounded delicious on paper and was delicious. That's exactly where he fell down last week. He had all the right ingredients there, all the right flavor profiles, and still somehow fell down and made something that wasn't flavorful.
Well, to be fair, one of the judges was like, when I saw this or when I heard it, like I thought this was going to be my least favorite dish, and it ended up being my favorite dish.
But I think she didn't like eggplant.
Yeah,
she has personal things that she doesn't like with those ingredients. I thought those ingredients sounded great. Again, he stuck to very sort of traditional Southeast Asian, very strong flavored ingredients, which is a big part of Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian cuisine. And this week he did knock it out of the park. It looked awesome. That looked like something I wanted to eat desperately.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a standout compared to the week before, and essentially what was a bit of a single tone flop.
Yeah,
even though it shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it just like this dish, it had promised bold flavors. Except in this dish, he delivered. I mean, the other two that we had at tops. Who's the other one? John.
Yep.
John's looked really tasty.
Right, and he kind of broke what essentially feels like should be a cardinal rule of shows like this, which is if you know one of the judges doesn't like something,
right, don't cook it.
Why are you cooking it?
It's just an unnecessary risk.
But I mean, that's John's personality, right?
That is John's personality, and I guess so. The way I feel about that is if there's a 90% chance you're going to cook it to a degree that they don't like it. You're going to do something to it that is going to make it unpleasant to them because they already don't like it. So let's say there's a 10% chance you're going to make it correctly. If you make it correctly, there's no reward other than getting to stay.
Right.
You're not going to get like bonus points. You're not going to get like extra points to stay extra next week.
Oh,
so,
I mean, he could win.
Yeah,
Winning is
he
the
can,
kind of
he can
thing.
win. I guess that's true. He could actually be in there for the win. If you cook something the judge doesn't like and you make them like it, that's a really good point to making you win. Are they winning anything, by the way, per episode?
No, I think it will be like other seasons where sometimes there's something special.
So then really, who cares if you win? Just be like Sylvia and make bland food and just sort of scoot by not messing up.
On a show like this,
Where I guess
like,
you're getting exposure and everything. Yeah, you want to do it as well as you can.
They're counting wins.
That's
they're
true.
Absolutely counting wins.
And John Teasar definitely has a bit of an ego. Not an ego. He wants to prove himself to people. He's of an age that he's either going to prove it now or he's going to die away unnoticed.
Yeah, and I definitely think it doesn't pay off right now, but I think later in the seasons, usually there's some discussion about, well, he did give us like 6 wins or he won 4 times.
That's true.
Like,
you got to risk it to get the biscuit, right?
risk it to get the biscuit.
Yeah.
That's the name of this episode.
But here's what I liked about this guy's food. Is that actually the name of this episode?
We could.
I mean, oh, you mean of our episode
Our
for the
episode.
podcast? Okay,
Yeah.
I thought you meant of the one
No.
for Top Chef. I was going
That
to
would
say,
be random.
yeah, that's Bravo should be hiring me to name their episodes.
Exactly.
What I really liked about John's dish was the caramelized part.
Oh, agreed.
He understands the Maillard reaction.
Yeah.
He gets that to bring flavor to something like okra, green onions, and crab. Well, not necessarily the crab, but just to that dish, you need something that is gone through the chemical process of making it caramelized.
Well, and especially with something like okra, which does have a very like slimy feel to it. Like I've worked with okra a little bit, and my parents used to have me drink like an okra like drink, which is just soaked in water overnight, and it's like really good for you as a diabetic. That's why I was drinking.
Okay.
It. And so, but it was slimy, and it tasted. It didn't actually taste that bad, but it was like a weird texture. So I could easily see how this sort of thing could happen. And I think by caramelizing it, you run like zero risk of that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it might still be slimy, but you're going to overwhelm it with that fond that you're creating on it.
Yeah.
With that essence of pure flavor when the sugar starts sort of burning, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think he made what looks like a very, very tasty dish. And clearly they like the dish too. I mean, it's very rustic looking. It doesn't look particularly like elevated food, but it looks like very good food. It's hard to comment on that, especially since we don't have the opportunity to actually taste the food ourselves. But I'll trust the panel on that one.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that sticks out to me about this specific challenge is winning this challenge wasn't about taking an ingredient and elevating it. It wasn't taking one type of dish and elevating it. It was about like taking a staple and putting a spin on it, but still keeping it a staple at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why we saw the first team win so heavily, because that's what they really did. They played on that theme so well. They kept so much of themselves in each dish, but they really made a dish that represented the low country food they were trying to create in people's homes. Which brings us to Casey, who I think did such a brilliant job with that.
Right.
Casey cooked greens, and I don't remember, it was Tom or someone said that greens are such a traditionally Southern thing, and no one can agree on the proper way to cook greens. But she made greens in a way that everyone enjoyed, though.
Exactly.
And that's so smart. And she did it by not being completely traditional and bringing some of herself into it, while still maintaining, the really essence of that dish.
Right.
And I think it's great. She took the salty element, which is usually done with ham hocks or something that's, fatty and porky, and she substituted in trout roe. Like, what a smart way to bring salinity to the dish and keep it clean, fresh, and modern with a good twist on it. And the coconut and the peanut. I mean, and the crispy chicken skin. So again, you're bringing in a terrestrial animal. Yeah. You're bringing in a land animal, and you want a little bit of that flavor, I guess, of the terroir of a meat. But in a crispy skin way, it's such a clever way because it becomes such a great contrast to it, first of all, because half the time when you eat turnip greens or any kind of collard greens or anything down south, it's very one note in terms of texture.
Yeah, and it's usually to me, it almost always ends up being like a little bit mushy.
It is. It's a one note thing. I mean, if you get it from a bigger chain place like Cracker Barrel, it's obviously going to be more mushy than getting at a mom and pop one off who just cooked it fresh for that day. But it's always going to be mushy. I mean, the ham hock itself cooks down and sort of pulls apart, and it all becomes kind of just a one-note porridge almost.
Exactly.
Of greens,
and which makes it feel really like heavy.
Right, exactly. Very heavy and not elevated at all. It feels like rustic country food. She's taken that same dish and adds now a crispy element to it, and she's also added that little burst from the caviar itself. So smart. Really, really smart. Just a great way to elevate a dish and still kept some of that fat in it by using things like coconut.
Exactly.
But fat in a different way. Not fat in just the meat sense, but even bringing in vegetable fats. I just think this was a really clever dish.
To get the flavor of a collard green dish, but to keep it in almost like a tasting fresh.
Yeah.
Both texturally and taste.
And you're supposed to use smoked ham hocks. And she still kept the smokiness in it by using smoked trout roe. I mean, how smart is that? That's so clever because it's still appreciating really the roots of the flavor profile of the dish, but making it something totally different, yet still completely recognizable. Really, really smart.
So one thing that I really liked, and of course that's kind of why we're both a little bit on a Korean fried chicken kick, is Sam's fried chicken. Now I know it didn't win anything. No one was like it's great, but this is the staple dish in a challenge like this. That's if you get it wrong, you're really risking going home.
Right. Sam had no chance of winning. He's making fried chicken for a Southern audience.
Right.
Like, there's no way that his there's a possible way, but it's very unlikely that no matter what he's going to do with that fried chicken, it's going to be something that's going to blow their minds. Yeah. This is something you eat all the time. It's going to be a nice new version, any number of things. It's not going to, like, open up their world again. He's not going to win something on this. He is, however... He won basically this contest as far as I'm concerned, though, because he didn't get sent home for fried chicken in a Southern kitchen. Exactly. That's what it comes down to. Sam made something that they all liked. He was up against some really fierce dishes like Casey's that were just so smart, that you couldn't really win with fried chicken over that. But he didn't go home for fried chicken in a Southern kitchen. That's amazing.
No, I agree. So let's talk about kind of how he cooked this dish, and because I think most people are used to kind of a buttermilk fried chicken sort of thing. So he used vinegar and tea brine, and that's something that I've never done with a fried chicken. So how does that work?
So when I do fried chicken, I don't do tea necessarily, but I do brine my fried chicken first.
Right.
And brining, if done correctly, you're going to end up with a very juicy, very flavorful bird because you're basically injecting salt back into the bird, and the salt's allowing it to retain its moisture. If you brine a bird too quickly, if you brine a bird, I think, too long as well, you're going to end up with dry meat where it actually where you're actually pulling everything out of it because of the salt. If you do it correctly, you're going to make a really juicy bird. And brining is going to impart so much flavor because when we're thinking about fried chicken or any meat for that matter, the flavor for the fried chicken, for the most part, is going to be on the surface if you don't do anything to the meat itself. Exactly. So you're going to have a very tasty surface with very non-flavored meat inside or non-flavored product inside. And that's one of the first rules of thumb when cooking. Everything should be seasoned. No one thing should make up for the seasoning or lack of seasoning for another thing. So when you brine chicken, you're going to get a delicious flavor the whole way through. Now, I've had tea brined and tea smoked things, usually in like Chinese cuisine, like tea smoked duck, tea smoked chicken. So tea can impart a really excellent, excellent flavor onto poultry. And I think it's so clever to brine with it because now you're bringing that great tea flavor, which really does complement poultry the whole way through the chicken. And tea also, as much as it has a root, in the Chinese culture of cooking, tea has a massive root in Southern cooking, in Southern cuisine, just Southern hospitality. So to bring tea flavor in is such a smart thing to bring into a chicken, especially if sweet tea is not being served on the table.
Exactly. And that's where I was reading up on this a little bit, and they talk about how like the tannins in the tea actually serve as a tenderizer, which is
that makes
usually
complete sense.
Yeah, exactly. Where buttermilk would kind of step in and do that. So yeah, I thought it was really well done. And yeah, to your point, he didn't go home for it. That's a huge
thing. In the South to not go home for it.
The last one I kind of wanted to talk about in the top was Amanda's dish, right? Because here I am, like, when she brought it out, when everything was happening, I was like, she's bringing ceviche to a Southern meal, right? And I'm kind of just like, it just doesn't speak Southern to me, and it wasn't at any of the meals that they kind of had at the beginning of the show. And then I started kind of reading it, and she's using Old Bay, cayenne, and all of a sudden, it becomes really clear that it's giving you that little bit of like acid kick that breaks up the meal a little bit, but in a way that isn't just a pickled vegetable.
This dish epitomizes what I was saying, that they just did such a good job of bringing themselves in, but keeping things very natural to the roots of the South. I've never been in a traditional Southern area, and I might be wrong because I'm not from the South, but I've been around it quite a bit, having a wife from down there, where they've done raw dishes, crudo dishes, anything like that. Unless you're going to a modern kitchen, traditional Southern low-country cuisine does not have raw fish.
Exactly.
That's just not a thing. Maybe raw oysters, lots of raw oysters, but ceviches are not a particular thing of low-country cuisine. I mean, there's a lot really close by. If you just go across the water, to the Gulf to Mexico or anything, you're going to get lots and lots of ceviche, obviously, but you're not going to get much there. And also, even in Mexico, you're going to get more ceviche on the West Coast. That's a Baja specialty. But she then brought in the Old Bay. And all of a sudden, she's bringing the flavors of a low-country boil. Now, how smart is that? So she's getting the freshness of their seafood and the traditional sort of flavors she's playing off. And the sorghum, we have a lot of sorghum that's grown in that part of the world. And she's pairing it with a more modern technique of food. And this is one of those things that I think would turn Southerners who are traditional about their flavors onto eating raw fish. Because they love the freshness of their seafood, and the best way to get that freshness is often through serving it raw, and then pairing it with the Old Bay, with the cayenne, with the sorghum is such a nod to the heritage of cooked foods that they have down there. So she's created this sort of cooked food flavor profile with the raw seafood. So it's like the best of both worlds, and I think it really worked. Also, it is our first ceviche or crudo of the season. I think that was the theme that I think dotted last season and the season before, where the amount of crudos. I think
making crudos.
Yeah, I think Chef Clico even mentioned, he said stop making crudos. Like, this is like the umpteenth crudo we've seen this season. Oh, another crudo from you. It was definitely last season, because actually the winner was guilty of making a lot of crudos.
He absolutely was.
And that's a lot of Jean-Georges' cuisine, which he's been influenced by. But it's our first crudo this season. Hopefully there will not be too many, but I always enjoy a good crudo or ceviche.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's not going to be a ton of opportunity for it to insert itself based on how, and I know we're really technically only one episode in, because that's one elimination, one quick fire. But it does seem like it's going to still be themed a lot in the region, and I'm not sure how much they can insert themselves
that way. Is not, like I was saying, it's not a dish that lends itself to that region, but it is, we have to remember still, how many, 15 modern chefs, 14 modern chefs left now?
Yeah.
Who all love crudos and all love ceviches. And sometimes
except for Jim. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, probably
sure
no. Jim. Jim seems pretty worldly.
He studied it. Yeah.
Jim seems pretty worldly. Jim seems to cook a lot of very Southern food. He cooked grits again this time, but also this was a Southern challenge. Yeah. So Southern is going to cook Southern food in the Southern challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move into talking about the bottom dishes, or the bottom meal, or the 8 rookie chefs. So right off the bat, we look, and aside from Emily's like biscuit mania in the episode, it seems like we've got a lot more of the same that we got from last week, which was people having a fundamental failure in understanding that this competition is not, hey, let's take dishes from my restaurant where I have time and the equipment I want and everything I need, and bring it into a completely different environment. So let's talk about BJ's dish, and the fact that he kind of got caught up basically miscooking pork.
BJ miscooking pork, the guy who's the self-proclaimed, I guess, like king of meat. Yeah, on this season, messes up a pork loin. Now, I can understand that. I can understand being freaked out by time and everything, and doing something incorrectly. It's a little harder to understand when that's your specialty. And it's also a little harder to understand when it just didn't seem like the dish was all that complex. Am I missing something here? He made a peameal pork loin. And they didn't really go too much into detail, I think, when they were talking about his other flavors.
Here's the thing. I have a feeling, and this is probably just editing, right? I have a feeling that the flavors were pretty on point. he didn't go home for a reason, even though he served some people basically raw meat.
Have you ever had peameal bacon before?
I have not.
It is delicious.
See, okay, there
In
you go.
In Toronto, they make
I'm
sandwiches that
convinced.
are just peameal bacon on bread.
Oh, that's
With like
amazing.
nothing else. It's delicious.
That's
It's real Canadian bacon.
Okay.
They don't have Canadian bacon in Canada. They have peameal bacon, and peameal bacon's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just bacon that's coated and cured in peameal and salt and sugars. But the peameal, for whatever reason, makes it really good because it crisps up when you cook it.
That's awesome.
But anyway, sorry, continue.
No, so it seemed like the other stuff was probably on point, or else I think he would have gone home.
Yeah.
People go home for less than that on the show. I think his excuse behind the cooking is just unacceptable. He's like, well, I didn't realize that, I was cooking the whole loin and the timing was going to be I'm like,
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand how if he's going on so much at the beginning of this episode, he's saying how he doesn't belong with the rookies. He belongs with the veterans.
yeah.
And maybe the producers threw that in there for a reason. But if you're ever going to say something like that, and then you screw up with a real rookie mistake like that, it's just, I don't know. I find it less excusable in that case, especially when he is so into his porkiness
Yeah.
in
exactly.
life.
Exactly.
That is especially in life. His bread and butter in life is pork. You
Oh, yeah.
should know that you're not going to get that to cook in the time that you have before it even goes in the oven.
in that method of cooking.
In that method of cooking.
Exactly.
There could have been lots of things. And he cooked them all differently then, even after the fact. I think he was rushed. I think he was panicked. I'll still give the guy the benefit of the doubt, because I guess the rest of it was good. The only thing they focused on was that it was undercooked. And to me, that's less of an offense than making a bad dish, I guess.
Yeah, but again, I mean, you look at the little offenses in the show as a whole, like people have gone home for tasting spoons.
Yep.
So I get it, but I'm willing to bet that the way it tasted did at least save him.
But there's a reason he didn't go home, and that's because someone's dish was worse than
yeah.
his.
So let's talk about Sylvia's dish real quick.
I'm glad we're talking about Sylvia's dish. I was here we're going to brush over Sylvia's dish. Sylvia has committed yet another crime this week.
Right, which is shocking because, to me, and I guess like in the span of the show, it might only have been a couple of days. But to me, that was my saving grace. It was like, well, if everything else was good and she under-seasoned her food, then she would just learn to season better. That did not happen.
She under-seasoned again.
Yeah.
And she's Italian.
Oh,
My
yeah.
goodness, talking about salty seasoned cuisines. Like, that is one of them. It looked so boring. It looked like the appetizer on a cruise ship. Not even a good cruise ship. We're talking about like Carnival cruise lines. Like, it is just not very exciting food. She has bored me now for 2 episodes straight. And I was really looking forward to having a great Italian cook. I don't see any influence of Italy in here. I don't see any real interest of the South. Okay, farro. We cook farro here too. I mean, like, come on. Like, if I cook spaghetti and I put tomato juice over it, I'm not going to claim that that's like an Italian influence.
No, that's fair.
No, I mean, it's just the food she's putting out is really mediocre, and she's going to last probably for a little bit because she's not going to make any grave mistakes. She's not going to undercook the pork. She's not going to do anything that's going to make her stand out badly. She also hasn't done anything to make her stand out in any kind of a good way. So we'll see how that plays out. She can only make it so far with that until she starts going up against chefs who aren't making mistakes and are making much better food than her.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost the punishment for them once they start mixing in with the veterans is the fact that it's going to be even harder for them. Like, it's one thing to think that you're losing a team challenge, you're going to be on the bottom, but then you're really only competing with people on the bottom.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, it's easier to stand out there. Now you put everything in the mix, it becomes tougher.
It's easier also just to scoot by there, too.
Yeah.
I mean, she's just going to be in the middle. This is the time to just be in the middle. She better do something that's going to wow. But she just, to me, doesn't look like she has the chops to wow. This dish was just so boring. It was even boringly plated. There was no color on it. It was a bunch of vegetables that maintain their original color, which is nice sometimes if you're doing it really well and you're laying out really in a beautiful way that's going to showcase the individual vegetables. But she's just putting them in like a little timbal shape, basically. This is very, very basic, very old-fashioned food that we don't need on this show.
Yeah.
There's nothing exciting about it.
All right. So let's talk about Mr. Burned Vegetables and his squash casserole.
The man burned his vegetables again.
Again. I don't understand.
If you do it twice, is it unlucky or is it because you're just messing up at that point?
Well, I mean, I think burned vegetables, undercooked pork, a bad tart, all of these things are still indicative of people who just don't understand how the show works.
I completely agree. And I think that's something that the veterans brought up when they were going to Whole Foods. They all had lists and were going through it very meticulously because this is not their first rodeo. And again, what we have to remember is this is not a show like Chopped. They're not doing this once and then doing it again. If they were on it and they were kicked off late in their season, they've done 12, 13, 14, 15 challenges already at that point. Correct. So it's not even their for first or second rodeo. It's their 15th rodeo to do something like this. So they probably have it down a lot better than these new guys. With that said, to go into Whole Foods without a list, that's beyond rookie mistake. Like, how would you not, as a chef, not think to have a list when you go in to grocery shop with 6 other people who are all trying to get different things at once and expect to have any cohesion at the checkout line?
Yeah, I think there's even small stuff here, right? Like, if you look at the checkout, when they complain about the fact that BJ puts his like whole loin in like early on and just like eats up a bunch of money, I'm like, he maybe served half of that of what he bought.
Maybe he did, or he could have served much smaller pieces per person. Yeah. So we are seeing some very, very rookie mistakes, or in that case, I really just think like, even if you weren't a rookie, if you're, a veteran or anything you were, if you made that mistake, that just comes down to just not being very savvy, period. Even if you weren't on a show, you should go with a list. Like, that's basic. You can't like chalk it up to, I was nervous, this is my first time. How do you not know to bring a list? But besides that, Jamie has been suffering from rookie mistakes for sure. And I think,
and they keep giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Which I think
Tom says it again. Like
I think
expect
they should.
More.
You know what? He made rookie mistakes. He messed up on some stuff. They didn't love his dish. His dish is still more interesting than Sylvia's, who we just looked at, who wasn't in the bottom part.
True.
There's more to this dish. It looks kind of one note, especially when you're having things like squash with the custard. Mm-hmm. Squash is inherently, no matter what you do to it, unless you batter it or something that's going to be something different to make it crispy, by itself, good luck trying to get that to be any kind of crispy, any kind of interesting texture. It's going to be mushy.
Yeah.
It might be a little firm, but the immediate mouthfeel you're going to get is something that's soft and mushy, and that you're going right through. Now you've paired that with a custard. Yeah. That's just kind of like mushy thing on mushy thing.
What did I add to my cream? I added cream.
Right.
Now it tastes like cream.
And also, those squash are very, very heavy with moisture. So we're adding moisture to something that's already kind of wet, and it's not going to be a good mouthfeel. It's not going to be a good texture, and it's not going to be something that's going to excite you even about the flavors, because the flavors will probably become so muddled in that texture.
And I think that conceptually was a big criticism right away. It was just like, I heard it, and I just didn't think it was going to be that appealing, and then it wasn't appealing.
I agree.
Like, it was one of those things where you have to almost go back and question, like, did you think about it? And maybe to be fair to him, part of his concept was the contrast of broccoli might have given it a little bit more of a different textural thing, and then he burnt the broccoli, so he didn't put the broccoli on. But still, like, your squash point is right there.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you basically just made a big kind of mushy squash thing that people without teeth could probably eat, but everyone else wouldn't really want to eat that much. Certain cultures, though, would like his texture. There are some cultures in the world that like a kind of mushy texture in certain things and really wouldn't mind it. Like a lot of like some Chinese porridge dishes and things that are purely mushy. With that said, no culture would have liked Sylvia's. Hers would have been boring in any culture.
Okay, boring in any culture, I think, is a stretch as long as it's seasoned correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
If it was seasoned correctly, sure. Maybe I wouldn't go with the boring thing, but it was boring and it wasn't seasoned correctly.
Right. So let's talk about Emily's dish. She had a pickled shrimp and dressed cucumbers, which, for all the crap that I think we've given her, at least it felt like she executed well and was a medium of the road.
She executed very well. It looked like she was very calm from what I could see, and she put out that exact kind of dish. This was a well executed, well thought out dish. It looks beautiful. I mean, that looks beautiful. Yeah, that looks like the South Carolina seaside. It's like the grass and like the sea underneath that white, like with the whiteness and the beautiful shrimp coming out of it. That is a really nice looking dish. Very, very well thought out. I'm sure it was dressed well. She used. I can't tell what the green is she used. I think it might be celery leaf. Do you know what that is?
That could be.
If it is, I love using that ingredient also. The cucumbers look nice. It is a really well done dish. Everything is prepped really well. There's nothing clunky about it. It has everything it needs and nothing it doesn't.
Yeah. And to me, it's a, like, to me, you can draw a direct comparison to how Amanda kind of elevated her ceviche versus this is the like, middle of the road version of it.
Very much so. With that said, though, not nearly as interesting still. Still,
no, exactly.
A well-composed dish, a nice-looking dish. There is nothing about this dish, though, that I would remember a week down the line.
Right. So let's top this off by talking about the worst dish from the chef that did ultimately get eliminated, which was Annie. Good prediction, Peter.
I did predict that last week, didn't I?
Yeah. Without much surprise, let's be fair.
No, without much surprise. Well, Annie was the one last week who committed the sin of calling a bunch of croutons a panzanella salad.
Right.
So already in my book, she was weak.
Agreed.
I mean, that's such a bad thing to mess up on the first thing because you just show that you don't have a real command over food. Yet you feel bold enough to claim that you do by claiming something is something when it's not. This week, she's making the tomato tart, which apparently she'd won for her green tomato tart in the Wall Street Journal or something.
Yeah,
she'd won some
or
award
Times or something. Yeah.
Why didn't she make that?
I don't know.
I'm really confused that if you have a winning dish in whatever publication it was, why not just make that? And why not just make a green tomato pie? We're not straying that far off of what a tomato pie is in the South. They eat green tomatoes in the South.
Yeah. Well, and I think you look at the call out, and I think the show just gets too much to her, right? So she literally says when she gets eliminated, like, fair. I might be a good chef, I'm just not good at this. And then you looked at her in the episode right after when they were doing like meal planning, and she was like, well, you gotta give me something, like just something. And I'm like, if you had, to your point, if you had a winning dish that fits into the theme of this, and no one else is taking it because no one else was going to do a tart, maybe a biscuit, why don't you just volunteer to do it?
I think one of the problems that she showed is that maybe she is a good cook at home. I have no idea, but she's definitely not a great chef. And I think that's I don't think that's a rude thing to say because a great chef commands a kitchen. They command other people. And what she did in that challenge was sit back passive aggressively stewing, ended up with the thing she didn't want, and then kind of complained about it. Yeah. A real chef would say, no, I'm not doing that. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to take this recipe, and this is the way I'm going to do it, and you guys can deal with it.
Which is
any number of things.
Which is why I loved when Jim put Emily in her place.
He did.
And she was like, oh, biscuit. He's like, look, I am not putting up a biscuit. Sorry.
Why are you making me do your biscuit? You do a biscuit. And, that's something we glanced over that shrimp, and the shrimp dish was nice. Why didn't she make her biscuit? How long did it take her to make that shrimp dish that she couldn't have made a biscuit if she wanted a biscuit so badly on that table? Why would you expect someone else to do it for you?
And to be fair, I think had Annie done a biscuit, I think she would have been safe.
She could have if she knew how to make a biscuit. They also didn't get any buttermilk. They didn't get the right ingredients for a biscuit.
Well, no, yeah. So she would have had to gone in wanting to make a biscuit.
Right, gone in wanting to make a biscuit.
Not like we got home, now we decided to make a biscuit.
Why not do that? And you know what? Why not make a biscuit with like a tomato jam or tomato chutney? Then you're playing off a tomato pie and you have a biscuit. That would have been a really smart game plan. Instead of making what really was a sort of half-assed tomato pie. Tom said it well. She went in to make a tomato pie without any of the ability to make a pie crust in that time or to make a dough that was going to be good enough in that time. And again, you should know these things as a chef going into a contest or a competition like that.
And I think kind of to wrap up this segment, if you look at how the entire episode went from when they sat down with their like locals and had a family dinner to the dishes they provided, you can look at the contrast between the two teams. Basically, the bottom team recreated dishes they saw. Right. Maybe they did a couple of different things to twist it up, but they really did recreate a lot of the stuff. Whereas on the top, no one really recreated it.
No.
They took flavors, they took concepts, they didn't recreate dishes.
One team used inspiration, one team used mimesis.
Yeah.
And the team that uses mimesis, unless you're doing it perfectly, especially for the chefs who cook that day in, day out, you're not going to win. It's just not going to happen. You know what? Even if you did do it perfectly, there is no perfect. Everyone has their own spin and their own take on that kind of food. And they're very set in their ways. And good luck making, like the perfect New York City Italian pizza your first time out for a New York City Italian pizza chef. It's just not going to happen. The first team was smart. They made the food they love, that they cook individually, and took the inspiration from the chefs they were cooking for and let that be sort of a note in their food, a note that led the direction of their composed dish rather than letting it dominate it. And I think that's clearly why the first team won.
Yeah.
Or the veterans run. I shouldn't say the first team.
The A team.
The A team
won.
Yeah.
Great.
There is an A team and a B team here, though. It's clear. I didn't think it was going to be such a juxtaposition when we came into watching this season. But these veterans are such better, more mature, more thought out chefs than what we're seeing from the rookies.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things. If I think about it conceptually, from like the grandiose TV world, right? Is if you're a chef that got into Top Chef, that feels like winning to you, right? Like for the veterans, winning is actually winning. For the rookies, having the first experience of being selected is a winning thing. And I think what ends up happening is they don't come as prepared as they need to be. If you compare this to season 1, I have 13 seasons of mistakes that I can watch, I can be sure not to do, that I can be prepared for. I'm sure none of these guys prepared that way.
Yeah, maybe it's such a victory just to get on the show that you kind of let your guard down.
And that's where on Top Chef, you see what happens between when you get selected for the finale and the finale. You prepare, you grow a little bit, you come back with a sense of what, of preparation to do what you're going to do. And that's why finales aren't usually capped with someone going home because they really, really suck. Finales are about who did it better than the rest,
right? Not
who sucked.
Right. And even these guys when they're on their first season, they by the time of the finale, they've had 15 competitions they've gone through. You start learning even in that season itself, and you start getting more confidence. I think a lot of this boils down to confidence too. These guys are probably really nervous. The veterans are shaking off the cobwebs. The bottom guys are just doing this for the first time. They're jumping in the water. They're getting a shock. So we'll see how that works out. We'll see if any of them start learning more and more throughout the competition and get more comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, great. So let's move on to Chef Testant of the Week. Who stood out to you this week? Who was your favorite from this episode?
My favorite, and I'm surprised I'm going to say this, was Casey.
Damn it. You can't take my Chef Testant of the Week.
Yours too? Her dish was so smart, so thought out, so respectful of the chefs that she was cooking for, yet put such her own twist on it. It's something that I absolutely want to eat. And it's something I could actually cook at home. It's something that anyone could cook at home. It's simple. And those are sometimes the most brilliant dishes, are things that aren't overly complicated. They don't rely, that you don't have to be a chef to make. It's just such a good idea that almost anyone could do it and it would still be delicious. And that's exactly what Casey accomplished this week. Yeah. Runner-ups.
So my runner-up,
since we both had the same winner, who's our runner-up?
So my runner-up would have been Sam, just because I mean, he spoke to me in a couple of different ways this episode, but again, I like fried chicken. He clearly executed it well. He didn't elevate anything. He didn't maybe to the level that he needed to win, but I feel like it showed me that he's still in it. He's in it mentally and literally from the situation in the show. Do you have an honorable mention?
I was just thinking about it now. It's going to be Sylvia.
Silva or Sylvia?
No, Sylvia.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. It's definitely not Sylvia.
I mean, it should be Emily because she was super entertaining.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my honorable mention actually is going to go to someone we haven't even talked about yet, who is Shirley Chung.
Yeah. Shirley
Chung's dish was the one dish that I watched on this episode that I really wanted to eat. Right. Everything else I would enjoy eating if I was at a party. It's not something I necessarily order for myself. That dish with the pork and oysters in that broth that looks so glutamatey and salty and delicious, I want that in my face hole right now.
I feel like the thing that punctuated her dish for me was when they brought out the table and one of the judges or one of the guys sitting at the table was like, it's a little bit heavy on the soy, but like that's what I was expecting. So like,
Right.
yeah, okay.
It looks super heavy on the soy. It looks salty, but it looks delicious. Yeah, that Shirley's I think has been my one to watch. I really think Shirley is possibly going to take it, unless she's outshone by someone else.
Well, and that's what the show always comes down to, right? Is there's always going to be a contestant who might leave because of a hiccup within one specific challenge. And I think, to be honest, that's why they have Last Chance Kitchen. Right. I know, yes, they get sponsorship dollars, all of that stuff, but I think they were kind of tired of trying to see, as a producer, can I justify leaving someone in just because? Whereas I feel like Last Chance Kitchen gives them an outlet.
It gives them a little bit of a chance, even if they made a mistake, or if they didn't see something that the audience saw and someone else goes home for it. That happened a few seasons ago with Josie when Josie came back. She really messed up something in the kitchen, if I can remember, and I think was it Christina or one of them went down for it. She took the fall for it, and Tom Kleeke was actually, they were interviewing him later about it. He said, I went back and watched that show. If I had seen what the audience had seen, there's no way I would have sent her home. I would have sent Josie home.
Right.
So Last Chance Kitchen gives that. It gives you an opportunity that maybe if they made a mistake, you still have a shot. If you're really that good of a cook, that good of a chef, you should make it back. You should be able to crawl your way back.
Yeah. And that's what like Kristen did on the season.
Kristen, not Christina. Kristen. Oh no, not Kristen was the one that got sent home because of Josie, right?
I don't remember that.
Okay, we'll have to go back and watch them.
We'll figure it out.
That is what she did. She came back and she ended up winning.
Yeah.
Her season.
Okay, yeah.
And
that's
she
what
was
it was.
a great chef.
Yeah.
She really was.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll see some of the cool stuff like that this year.
All right.
We're going to have our first one coming up now, right?
Yeah.
We've
already had it.
Oh, we've already had it?
It was Annie versus Gerald. I did not watch it, so I don't know.
I haven't watched it either, so we don't have the outcome yet.
Yeah.
But
it's fine.
Any favorites in that outcome?
Gerald.
Yeah, I think mine too.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, Annie's already written her own ticket out of like, I'm just not good for this type of environment.
Yeah, she's already started making excuses for herself. When that starts happening,
yeah,
I don't see much promise after that. And she wrongly calls something a panzanella salad.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let that go, by the way, all season.
We are going to make a panzanella at some point.
Yeah, we'll have to.
All right, so let's move on to predictions. The one thing we know from the next episode preview is the fact that there are actually going to be some intermingling. There's a mise en place challenge, so those are always fun to watch. So those teams will probably play out. Who do you think is going home next?
Well, I want it to be Sylvia.
Okay.
I have a strong feeling she's going to do another sort of mediocre dish. I don't think she's really understanding this competition. I don't know if there's some kind of culture barrier or language barrier here, but I don't think she understands how much she needs to up a game here. This isn't a contest for people who are just going to cook nice food. This is a contest for people who are going to innovate. So I think I want her to go home. I don't think she is. I think she's going to be mediocre again.
My one pushback on that is that we haven't had a dish yet in the competition or a situation in the competition where she's got to make her own sort of thing. It has all been within certain
constraints.
Yeah.
And constraints that she is very not used to. I think
Right.
she really doesn't understand. She probably didn't. Maybe she didn't want to over season because she didn't feel like it was going to be the right seasoning for the culture she was cooking for. That's always possible.
So yeah, I will agree with that. All right. What else you got?
BJ was kind of shook that episode, but he seems like the kind of guy who's going to bring it back. He seems like the kind of person who's going to learn from his mistakes, understand what to do, what not to do. He's a little cocky, maybe without any reason to be that way, especially saying he belongs with the veterans. Katsuji's been solid. Brooke's been solid. They've all been solid. It's tough to call someone who's going to go home. If I was absolutely going to say someone who's going to go home, it's going to be Jamie.
Yeah.
Jamie's I think my pick.
Yeah.
I think Jamie has a lot of good chops. I think Jamie understands food very well. Jamie's now made mistakes in 2 episodes in a row. He almost got sent home this week. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes home next week.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's definitely a point, because let's look at the veterans, right? Out of last week, the veterans that you thought had the least likelihood of being successful were Casey, John, and Sheldon.
Right.
You predicted Sheldon would go home this week.
Yeah.
Who is the top 3 this week?
Yeah. No,
Casey,
totally
John,
off on that
and Sheldon.
Totally off on that one.
But that's the demonstration of what it takes to be a veteran. Like,
right, to bounce right back.
Pivot.
Right.
Don't let it get to you. Move.
These veterans seem so solid in their cooking this season. I can't pick any of them to go home next week.
Yeah.
There would be nothing to base that on.
Yeah. So I'm with you on the BJ Jamie bandwagon. I think one of them's going home.
Yeah. BJ, Jamie, Sylvia are my 3 bottoms right now.
Yeah. I don't think Sylvia's going home next week.
I don't either. I think she's going to cook another kind of bland, average dish and kind of get through.
Yeah. Great. So let's move on to recipe of the week, where Peter takes a recipe from the week. Now, where Peter takes his inspiration from one of the dishes that was cooked this week and does our own kind of deconstructed spin on it. Not deconstructing the recipe, but, us. Peter, what's your dish of the week?
Well, in honor of our first crudo / ceviche, I am going to make a crudo. And
plus ceviche?
Plus ceviche. Yeah, I forgot about that part. This is actually going to be crudo plus ceviche. I wanted to go as hardcore into it as I could. So this week, I'm not going to take inspiration necessarily from the challenge itself. I'm taking inspiration from Top Chef. The long, long tradition of crudos on this show. Last season, I think even Tom Colicchio made mention of how many crudos they had eaten. And the person who was almost the culprit of making the majority of those crudos ended up winning the season.
Yeah.
Crudos are delicious.
And I think that was the complaint last season was like, I can't send you home for making a good crudo.
Right. It's a little uninspired. We have to remember that cooking often involves heat and fire, not just chemical reactions. But anyway, in honor of the crudo tradition, I'm going to make a crudo. And it's going to be a salmon crudo with a Yuzu Kosho Vinaigrette and a tomato, onion, and Shiso Ceviche.
Yes.
So we're going to do crudo and ceviche on the same
sounds
plate.
So good.
It'll be really good. Lots of citrus, lots of interesting herbal notes. And if you've never had Yuzu Kosho before, go out and buy some. Most Japanese specialty stores will carry it. It's basically just ground up salt, yuzu rind, and shishito pepper. So it's spicy, it's salty, it's sour. It might be the perfect condiment.
I have not had it, and I'm looking forward to trying it.
You got to use it very sparingly. A lot of sushi chefs will put it just on a single piece of nigiri sushi. It's a tiny, tiny little bit of Yuzu Kosho, and it brightens everything up. Or sometimes put on a little bit of grilled chicken. It's delicious stuff. I'll show you guys how it's used.
Awesome. All right, that's it for this week's episode of Deconstructed. If you like this episode, be sure to give us a like and comment on iTunes. Peter's recipe of the week can be found on our blog at nkrn.org/deconstructed. And as always, you can tweet comments, questions, and complaints to us at deconstructpod. Unlike Annie, you don't have to pack up your knives and go, but you can't stay here. We'll catch you guys next week.
See y'all later.
Deconstructed, the Top Chef podcast, is brought to you by the Nerdy Nights Network. For more great content, visit nkrn.org. Our theme music was brought to you by podcastthemes.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor for the show, please tweet at us at nerdy_nights.